Did you know that more than 90% of viewers don't subscribe to our channel? If you're watching this and haven't subscribed yet, please consider hitting that subscribe button. We don't run ads on our videos, so we don't earn anything from them. Every subscription, every like, every comment truly means the world to us. Your support keeps our passion alive and motivates us to create more. We'd also love to hear from you. Tell us where you're watching from and what time it is right now. Let's start our story. Story number 1. On a clear autumn night, a long-haul driver named Daniel guided his rig through the mountains of the Northwest. The truck's engine gave off a steady, comforting growl, and the headlights carved a narrow tunnel of pale gold through the darkness. Pines rose on either side of the interstate, tall and silent, their tips vanishing into the star-sprinkled sky. It was just past 1 in the morning. The rush hour traffic had faded hours ago, and now the highway felt like a private road laid out just for him. Every few minutes, a distant set of headlights would drift into view, slide past, and vanish in his mirrors. Most of the time, though, the road was empty. Just the reflective dashes ticking by like the second hand of a very long clock. A green sign flashed by on the right. Next services 96 miles. Daniel checked his fuel gauge, then the time glowing on the dashboard. He was fine on both. But the sign made something in his chest tighten a little anyway. 96 miles of mountains, forest, and nothing else. It was the kind of stretch that made even experienced drivers feel small. He took a sip of coffee that had gone lukewarm in its thermos. The radio murmured at low volume, sliding through songs and talk stations, then giving way to faint static as the truck climbed higher into the hills. A half moon hung over the black silhouette of the mountains, watching, impassive. Somewhere around mile 270, the road narrowed slightly, curving around the face of a cliff. A metal guardrail lined the right side. Beyond it, only darkness and the vague hint of treetops far below. The yellow line on the left glowed softly, perfectly straight ahead. The regular FM station fizzled into pure static and then silence. Daniel tapped the knob, but the display showed only a frequency and a thin bar of static. Out here, reception was always hit or miss, so he switched to the CB, turning the squelch knob until the hiss leveled out. The speaker stayed quiet. No late-night jokes, no chatter from other trucks. Just the soft, constant rush of the engine and the humming tires. Then, as the truck rounded another curve, the CB crackled. "Southbound on 11, you might want to hear this," a calm, flat voice said. "Daniel. You especially." His hands tightened on the wheel. No one had used his first name on the CB tonight. No one had even addressed him. The voice sounded plain, not menacing, not friendly. Just steady, like someone reading off a script. He reached for the microphone, then hesitated. Maybe the name was a coincidence. Lots of Daniels on the road. Still, something about the way the voice had said it felt precise. Aimed. The CB hissed again. "Freightliner with the blue cab and white trailer," the voice added. "Company number 724. Daniel, you're going to want to get off the interstate at mile marker 284. There's a detour up ahead. Take the service road." His gaze flicked to the dash. His truck number matched. 724. The little hairs on his arms rose. He pressed the microphone button anyway. Breaker 1 to 9. Who's calling 724? Silence. The CB gave only static, soft, and even. Daniel listened for a long moment, then set the mic back in its cradle, eyes returning to the road. The guardrail gleamed in his peripheral vision like a thin sheet of metal light. Maybe it was a dispatcher relaying through some kind of patch, though he'd never heard it sound quite like that. Or another driver, pulling a very specific prank. That didn't sit right either. Whoever it was, they had the company number, the cab color, and his name. Mile marker 281 slid past on the right. A narrow, older sign, slightly tilted. He checked his GPS display. The screen showed the familiar ribbon of the interstate stretching through the mountains with no upcoming exits until a major junction much farther south. No mention of a service road at 284. Out here, GPS maps sometimes miss things. Older forest roads, construction detours. It happened, but the voice's tone, that strange, measured calm, bothered him more than the missing road on the screen. At mile 282, the CB crackled again, as if someone had just cleared their throat in an empty room. "Daniel," the same voice said, There's a multi-vehicle blockage at mile 290. You won't see it until the last minute. Jackknifed rig. Passenger cars. You'll be stuck for hours. Or worse, take the service road at 284. It reconnects past the accident. No urgency, no raised volume on the word worse. Just that flat, level recitation. Daniel's eyes narrowed. There hadn't been any warning from dispatch. Nothing on the traffic apps earlier. But the mountains could swallow signals, and accidents happened quickly. He pressed the microphone button again. You got a handle there, friend? Name of that service road? A faint crackle, the soft hum of empty air. There was, very clearly, no one on the other end this time. He let the microphone go, jaw set, and reached instinctively for his phone. No service. A tiny symbol in the corner of the screen showed an empty triangle. No bars. The green blade of another sign slipped past ahead. Mile 280. 3. 1 mile. The interstate straightened, and the cliffside opened a little. Ahead, the highway passed through a slight saddling in the hills, disappearing into the night. On the GPS, the road was a clean, uninterrupted line. Take the service road, Daniel, the voice said. It sounded a touch closer now, as if the speaker had moved a foot forward. You do not want to be on the main line at 290. He didn't reach for the microphone this time. Instead, he watched the right shoulder carefully as the odometer ticked, watching for any sign that didn't match the map. His headlights washed over dark trunks, rock faces, and faintly shining reflectors. Then he saw it. A small metal sign, older than the bright green markers, stood at the edge of the shoulder. White letters on a faded green background. Service Road, 284. Local traffic. Only. A simple exit lane cut away from the interstate, angling into the trees. No overhead lights, no modern signage. Just a narrow strip of asphalt, peeling away into darkness. On the GPS, nothing appeared. The display showed only an unbroken gray highway, no junction, no turnoffs. The digital arrow representing the truck slid right past the approximate area, as if the other road didn't exist. His foot eased off the accelerator while he thought. If the warning was false, and he took the service road, there was the risk of a rough route, or a dead end, or a long, unnecessary detour. But if the warning was real and he stayed on the interstate, there might be a closed highway and hours lost, stuck in a line of blinking taillights. He had learned to respect the road and its surprises more than he trusted any software. The wheels hummed softly. The exit slid alongside. The sign stating local traffic only flashed past his window. Daniel flicked on his turn signal. The truck eased onto the narrow exit, tires rolling across the rumble strip with a low, growling vibration. The CB fell silent again as he left the main line, and the highway's continuous whir faded behind him. The engine's noise felt louder, more isolated, as the service road wrapped around into the trees. The lane was just wide enough for his rig, with only a few feet between his wheels and the gravel shoulder on each side. No street lamps, no reflective posts, just the tight cone of his headlights, painting trunks and low brush in stark white. The road curved gently, then straightened. Behind him, the interstate vanished from view, swallowed by the forest and the hillside. He glanced one more time at the GPS. The screen showed his truck icon still glued to the interstate, as if it had ignored his turn completely. It drifted forward along the digital highway, oblivious to the fact that in reality, the truck was mid-curve on a nameless black strip of asphalt. Daniel tapped the display. It didn't react. Up ahead, the service road descended into a hollow. The trees leaned inward, branches forming a rough arch over the lane. The air outside the cab looked darker, somehow thicker, as if it had more weight. Good, the voice said softly through the speaker. You're clear of the main line. Daniel's hand went to the CB without thinking. All right, he said, voice a little tighter than before. If you're going to guide me, go ahead and tell me where this road comes out. Silence answered him. Not static, not another voice, just nothing at all. A prickling sensation crept along his neck, as if unseen eyes were studying him from the dense tree line. He adjusted his seat, making sure he sat upright, alert. The service road continued steadily downhill. No side roads, no painted lines. Just a narrow thread of asphalt that seemed to fade at the edges into dirt. Every so often, the headlights threw pale light across an old reflector hammered into a post, its surface dull and scratched. Minutes ticked by. The truck carried on, past the 1, 2, 3 faint mile markers without any numbers. The GPS screen remained stubbornly certain he was somewhere else, the truck icon now gliding over a straight portion of interstate he knew he was no longer on. When he reached for the CB another time, the speaker whispered not with a voice, but with something softer, like someone exhaling right beside his ear. He froze, hand hovering, near the radio. "Keep moving, Daniel," the voice said a moment later. Not over the CB now, not through tinny speakers. It seemed to come from somewhere low in the dashboard, or perhaps just behind the glove box. Not loud, but close. Close enough to feel, somehow. He flicked the radio off. The voice didn't cut out. "It isn't safe to stop here," it added mildly. "You're not alone on this road." That simple sentence threaded deeper into his mind than any shouted warning ever could have. He scanned the mirrors. The darkness behind him was unbroken, an endless, empty stretch of asphalt disappearing into black. No headlights. No red dots. Nothing. Up ahead, though, the road seemed to swell and widen slightly. A shape emerged at the far edge of his high beams, broad and low. An old semi-truck sat halfway onto the shoulder, nose tipped slightly toward the trees. Its paint had peeled away in long strips, revealing dull metal patched with rust. One of its headlights was missing, the other a blank, dead eye. The trailer, a faded white, bore the ghost of a company logo so weathered it was impossible to read. For a second, Daniel's breath caught. The truck's outline looked almost familiar. The cab's squarish shape, the sloping grille, the way the mirrors jutted. They matched the older style his company had retired years ago, before the paint scheme changed. As his rig approached, the beam of his headlights slid across the door of the abandoned truck. His own company's emblem stared back at him through the grime, the faded color almost the exact shade his trailer still carried. He eased the wheel slightly to give the other vehicle a wide berth. As he rolled past, he flicked his eyes toward the cab, toward the driver's window. For just a fraction of a second, it seemed as though someone sat inside. A silhouette, unmoving, hands on the wheel, head tilted toward the windshield. Then the truck rolled past, and the abandoned rig vanished into darkness behind him. The voice in his dash spoke again. "Some of them made the same choice," it said. "They didn't all make it back to the line." A cold pressure settled in his chest. He cleared his throat, forcing his voice to be steady. "What is this road?" he asked the empty cab. "Where does it go?" "To the other side of the accident," came the even reply. "To where you need to be." He thought of the non-existent warning on his apps, the total silence on the real CB channels, the missing road on his GPS. He thought of that rotting truck with his company's faded colors, sitting miles from any mapped junction. His fingers tightened on the wheel. "How far?" he asked. The voice didn't answer. The service road kept going. The trees grew closer to the edge of the asphalt, the branches brushing the night just beyond his headlights. The road surface looked older now, cracked in places, but smooth enough that his tires rolled without bouncing. He glanced at the dashboard clock. Nearly half an hour had passed since he'd left the interstate. By now, if the service road truly paralleled the highway, he should be nearing some kind of reconnecting ramp, or at least a distant glow from another route. But there was only the darkness and the hiss of his engine. A strange, quiet thought lodged in his mind, one that he did not like at all. The odometer. He checked the trip reading he'd reset earlier that evening. The numbers stared back, unchanged, as though the truck had not traveled so much as a single additional mile. He blinked, looked again. Still the same. He watched carefully for the next few minutes, counting the flashing roadside posts as they went past. 10 of them. 20. 30. The odometer digits did not move. The road beneath him felt real enough. The rumble strips that lined one narrow edge thrummed when he drifted too close. The steering wheel responded like normal. The diesel engine drank fuel and gave power as usual. But the numbers refused to acknowledge any of it. A half laugh tried to rise in his throat, more out of disbelief than humor. He swallowed it back down. "You don't need those numbers here," the voice observed almost gently. "There are other measures for distance." It was tempting to try and deny what he saw, to blame the readings on a broken sensor, on a glitch in the computing modules. But the way the road seemed to hold him, stretching ahead without ever shifting closer to what he expected, made excuses feel thin. He drew a slow breath. Then, without warning, something new emerged at the edge of the headlights. A clearing opened on the right-hand side, a wide gravel pull-off that hadn't been visible until the last moment. Lined along its far edge were 3 more semi-trucks. Their trailers were backed up toward the tree line, their cabs facing the road, parked in a neat, watchful row. All 3 had their interior lights on. Soft, yellow glows filled their windshields, as if someone inside had just climbed into the sleeper or was reaching for something behind the seats. But no one stepped out. No silhouettes moved in front of the windows. No doors opened or closed. The truck sat completely still, like props, carefully posed. As Daniel's rig crept past, his headlights reflected off their chrome and glass, turning them into pale, unmoving faces. He searched for logos, for company names. Either they had been scrubbed away by rain and sun, or they had never been there at all. He did not slow down. He didn't speed up either. He held his pace steady, eyes straight ahead, until the strange rest area faded behind him, and the darkness closed in again. They stopped, the voice remarked softly. They were very tired. It's so easy to pull over and close your eyes. The road understands. It knows how much strain it asks. Daniel moistened his lips. Are they all right? He asked, surprising himself with the question. For a while, the voice replied. Then the line moves on without them. Things left behind. Here, stay. Here. The forest seemed to lean closer, the trunks a little thicker, the spaces between them narrower. Somewhere in the distance, an animal cried a short, sharp sound quickly swallowed in silence. His fuel gauge still showed the same reading as before he turned off the interstate. The clock on the dash had stopped moving, frozen exactly 3 minutes after he'd taken the exit. Only the second hand, a tiny red thing, still made its endless circle, round and round, ticking away into nowhere. The urge to slam on the brakes nearly overwhelmed him. To cut the engine, climb down, and feel the pavement under his boots, just to prove that it existed. To stand in that heavy night sound and listen for something wind, frogs, insects that would place him back in an ordinary world. Instead, he did something else. He reached over, thumbed the overhead light on, and pulled the old paper atlas from the side pocket of the door. With one hand still on the wheel, eyes flicking between the road and the map, he flipped to the state he was in, then to the page covering the current region. The interstate was there, the curving gray strip he'd studied earlier, the mountain range, the mile markings, but where his finger traced the area around mile 284, there was no side road. Not even a thin dashed line for a minor access lane. Only a tiny faded notation in the margin near that spot caught his attention. Logging route closed, unstable grade, do not enter. He checked the machine-printed legend below. The closure had been added more than a decade earlier. He set the atlas down slowly, feeling the thin pages tremble against his palm. You won't find this road on paper, the voice said quietly. Paper deals in only one version of the world. Daniel's yacht clenched. Then where am I? He whispered, though there was no one there to hear. The air itself seemed to change. The darkness outside thickened, edges softening as if the world beyond the side windows had been painted in watercolor and then blurred with a wet brush. Ahead, dim points of light shimmered between the trees, bobbing slightly as if a line of small lanterns swayed from invisible hooks. They weren't bright enough to be headlights. They moved too slowly to be anything on the road. They were off to the right, deep in the woods, following roughly the same direction as the lane he traveled. The sight of them made his stomach twist faintly. They reminded him of something he couldn't quite name, some childhood memory of being in a dark field and mistaking distant porch lights for stars fallen to earth. They keep pace even now, the voice observed. All the ones who took the turn and never found the line again. Enough. He realized something then, a simple truth that cut through the fog of the strange, hypnotic road. Nothing forced him to keep going forward. He could stop, he could turn the wheel, however many back and forth moves it took, and point the nose of his rig the other way. Even if the road didn't want that, even if the voice whispered and hinted and tried to draw him deeper. As the idea solidified, the atmosphere in the cab seemed to shift, tightening like skin around a sudden bruise. Daniel, the voice said, still calm but with a subtle new note beneath it. You don't want to turn around here. The shoulder is narrow. The ground is soft. You could slide. Much safer to continue. Just a bit farther now. He ignored it. A small widening in the road approached the mouth of another turnout, this one empty, nothing but gravel and a sagging wooden post with no sign attached. Without allowing himself time to reconsider, he eased off the throttle and began to brake. The truck slowed, air rushing through the brakes with soft sighs. "Keep moving," the voice murmured. "You're almost where you're meant to be." The wheels rolled onto the gravel with a gentle crunch. Daniel brought the truck to a full stop, the engine dropping to a low idle, the cab giving a slight, settling sway. For the first time since he'd left the interstate, he heard true silence beyond his own vehicle. No distant traffic, no rustle of leaves, just a stillness so complete it told him, more clearly than any words, that where he sat now was far from any familiar highway. He released his seatbelt and reached for the door handle. As his fingers closed around it, the voice spoke again, closer than ever. "Do not step out," it said, almost softly pleading. "If you do, it will notice." He paused. "Who?" he asked. The question hung between the steering wheel and the windshield, unanswered. He pushed the door open anyway. Cool night air flowed into the cab, carrying a damp, earthy smell, the kind that clung to deep woods and shaded ravines. It felt colder than the season should allow, with a faint metallic tang that made him think, absurdly, of old keys and coin jars. He climbed down from the cab, boots touching gravel with a reassuring crunch. Standing upright, away from the steering wheel and instrument panel, the truck looked huge, hulking, like a great sleeping animal. The forest surrounded the turnout on three sides. The trees closest to him were sharply outlined in his running lights, bark etched in fine detail. Beyond them, darkness layered itself, deeper and deeper, until it seemed more like a wall than a set of separate trunks and branches. The road he'd been traveling stretched away in both directions, a narrow ribbon barely distinguishable beyond the reach of his headlights. It did not look special. It did not look haunted. It looked like any forgotten back route, cracked and aging, used by almost no one. He pulled a small flashlight from his pocket and clicked it on. The beam poked a thin white tunnel out into the roadway, then swept across the tree line. Nothing moved. No animals darted. No insects buzzed. Behind him, from within the cab, the engine's idle deepened slightly, as though the machine itself were breathing slower. On some instinct that even he couldn't have named, he turned to check his truck's mirrors. The glass showed the angle of the turnout, the edge of the road, the tails of distant trees. And then, as he stepped a half-pace to one side, they showed something else. The world reflected in the mirrors was not the one he stood in. Instead of the dark, forested service road, the mirrors showed the bright, clean stretch of interstate he'd left behind. Wide lanes, fresh lines. Far off down that reflected road, the faint glow of oncoming headlights, a white sign flashing by in the mirror's perspective, mile 284. His own truck sat in the reflection too, of course. But in that distant world, it was still on the main line, blinkers off, rolling smoothly south. Daniel's breath misted faintly in the cold air as he stared. The reflected version of himself in the driver's seat turned the wheel slightly, navigating a gentle curve that did not exist in the road he could see with his own eyes. For a long, suspended few seconds, the two realities, the one in front of his face and the one trapped in the silvered glass, overlapped in his senses. Then, slowly, the reflective scene darkened. The interstate faded. The mirrored world sank back into the blank blackness of the current night. When he looked again, the mirrors showed only his own empty turnout and the silent trees. From the dashboard, the voice sighed. "You see how far from the line you've drifted," it murmured. "You can't walk back, not from here." Daniel stepped closer to the open door, one hand reaching up to grip the frame. "Watch me," he said under his breath. He climbed back into the cab, shut the door with deliberate care, and settled behind the wheel. His heart was beating faster now, but his hands felt strangely steady. The engine's temperature gauge sat rock solid in its normal place. The fuel gauge had not budged. The clock was still frozen, but the steering wheel, when he wrapped both hands around it, felt solid and real. He took one long breath, another, and eased his rig into gear. "Daniel," the voice said again, still calm, but threaded with something new tension maybe. "If you try to go back, the road will resist. It's easier to continue." "It always is." He didn't answer. Slowly, he started a wide, careful turn in the gravel, backing and adjusting, inching the long trailer around. Each time he shifted into reverse, the backup alarm beeped into the still night, sounding far too loud for the empty forest. The trees at the turnout's edge seemed to press a little closer. If he watched them too long, their trunks almost appeared to bend forward, as if they were leaning at an impossible angle. At one point, as he checked his side mirror during a reverse, he saw a shape standing at the far edge of the headlights, tall and indistinct, like the suggestion of a person half-formed from shadow. He ignored it and completed the turn. At last, the truck faced back the way it had come. The narrow strip of asphalt he'd traveled now lay ahead of the hood, unspooling uphill into darkness. He nudged the throttle and rolled back onto the service road. As his rig eased onto the pavement, a subtle resistance pressed against him, not from the engine, but from something deeper, as though the very path itself tried to hold him in place. It was like driving through a strong headwind he couldn't feel on his skin. The voice grew fainter, words half swallowed. "You're going the wrong way," it whispered. "The line is not there. It's too late." He didn't slow. He locked his eyes on the white fringe where asphalt met shoulder, on the faint glimmer of old reflectors ahead. He didn't look into the woods. He didn't glance at the dash for time or mileage. He just drove. The road did its best to confuse. The same crumbling shoulder appeared, again and again. The same lopsided mile marker. The same leaning tree, with a bare, broken limb. More than once, it felt like he was passing the same point over and over. He kept going. The air inside the cab changed by degrees. First slightly warmer, then fresher. The metallic tang lifting just a little. Somewhere overhead, very faintly, a gust of wind sighed through high branches. At some point, he wasn't sure when the clock on the dashboard gave a small click and started moving again. The fuel gauge sagged by a tiny, honest fraction. The resistance lessened. And then, without fanfare, he saw it. The place where the service road met the interstate. No sign this time. No old metal plate. Just a paved lane rising out of the trees, curving up to join the wide, well-marked highway barely 50 yards away. The interstate itself glowed with that familiar, open brightness, even at this hour. The reflective paint, the periodic overhead lights, the expanse of multiple lanes. A single truck roared past from left to right, its taillights a pair of red dots streaking off into the distance. Daniel didn't hesitate. He guided his rig up the curve, wheels gently leaving the narrow, cracked strip of asphalt behind. As soon as the front tires hit the main line, a sound like a soft pop went through the cab, more felt than heard. The radio, still turned off, flicked on by itself, settling on a random station mid-song. His phone chimed once in the cup holder. Signal bars suddenly full. In the side mirrors, the merging lane behind him looked perfectly ordinary, just a short ramp fading into a stand of normal, wind-stirred trees. No black void. No tall, bending shapes. The service road was simply there. And then not. Swallowed in the rush of passing scenery. He checked the mile marker as he passed it. Mile 283. He had come out a full mile before the exit he had taken. If, on any map or official record, that exit had ever existed at all. For a long time, he drove in silence, listening only to the hum of his engine and the familiar whisper of tires on good pavement. Cars occasionally appeared ahead or behind, filling the world with the reassuring presence of other people. He stopped at the next open truck stop near dawn. The parking lot was dotted with rigs, engines idling, drivers sleeping. Inside, a handful of early morning regulars sat hunched over mugs of coffee. At one corner table, 3 older drivers talked in low voices. Daniel caught a few words as he passed mentions of strange exits, of phantom detours, of roads that aren't on any map. He paused, considered joining them, then moved on. Later, sitting in his cab with a fresh coffee in his logbook, he opened his dashcam footage on a small screen. He scrolled back to the time he had taken the turn. The camera showed the nighttime roadway, mile markers flicking by. It showed the narrowing of the road along the cliff, the guardrail gleaming. But when the moment came that he remembered seeing the sign for the service road, the video revealed no such thing. The truck's turn signal clicked on by itself in the footage. The wheel in his visible hands did not move. The lane lines remained straight. There was no exit, no side road. Only, for 3 seconds, a faint wobble in the image. A blurring, like the camera's lens had unfocused. Then the footage jumped. One frame, he was approaching mile 283. The next, he was passing mile 283 from a slightly different angle, the truck in a marginally different lane position, as if some sliver of reality had been gently clipped out and bridged over. He watched the sequence twice more, then turned off the screen. He returned to the interstate that night and many nights after, hauling freight from one city to another as he always had. The mountains remained beautiful. The trees shifted through their seasons. The guardrail at that stretch stayed as silver and ordinary as anywhere else. But he never again trusted an unmarked road that appeared where his maps insisted there was nothing. He kept his CB volume higher. He listened for voices that knew more than they should. And once, weeks later, set against the low hum of the engine during a long, uneventful drive, he heard it again. A faint crackle beneath a country song, like someone speaking from the far side of a long tunnel. "Stay on the line next time, Daniel," the flat voice whispered. Then the station's regular broadcast swelled to full volume, and the moment was gone, leaving only the road and the night ahead open and waiting. Story number 2. The first thing Maria noticed that night was the sky. Out over the desert, far from city glow, the stars looked almost crowded. They gathered in dense swirls and rivers, so bright that the space between them seemed thinner than usual, as if the sky itself were made of something fragile and easily torn. Her truck's headlights pushed a pale tunnel of light down the endless interstate. But beyond those beams, the darkness lay open and vast, stretching out on both sides into low scrub and dry washes. The road was a straight gray ribbon, running so far ahead it seemed to meet the stars at the horizon. It was just after midnight on a summer run through the southwest. Heat still leaked up off the asphalt, softening the edges of distant shapes, even though the temperature outside had dipped enough to make the cab's vents feel pleasant against her arms. Maria had been driving long haul for years. Nights like this were why she loved it and why she respected it. Empty lanes, no brake lights, just a slow, steady hum of tires on pavement, and the quiet sense that the rest of the world was asleep. She passed the last gas station she knew for nearly 100 miles, a squat building with one flickering canopy light and a handful of trucks parked at the edge of a dirt lot. Its sign glowed with tired neon. She thought briefly about stopping for coffee, but her thermos was half full, and the road ahead felt smooth and easy. Out here, even the radio stations thinned out. After a while, the music turned to static. Then back to music. Then silence, as the stations fell behind her. She didn't bother with the CB much that night. The channel had been mostly quiet, and she wasn't in the mood for chatter. Mile markers ticked by on the right, small green signs spaced evenly apart. 187, 186, 185. Nothing out of place, no strange voices, no odd detours, just the stretch of concrete, the luminous dash, and the soft hiss of air from the vents. She saw the car just after mile marker 180. It came into view as a shimmer on the shoulder at first, 2 flashes of red and orange against the black. As she drew closer, the shapes resolved into hazard lights blinking on the back of a small silver sedan parked at the edge of the road. The car's trunk was slightly open, held down with a bungee cord. Its driver's side door stood ajar. A woman in a light-colored blouse stood beside it, one arm braced against the frame, looking tired. Next to her, a child in a yellow t-shirt and small sneakers hugged a bright red backpack to their chest. Maria checked her mirrors, then eased a little toward the left lane to give them space. She wasn't supposed to stop on the main line unless there was immediate danger, but she always paid extra attention when she saw kids out there. People did risky things when scared, especially in the dark. She slowed slightly as she passed, eyes sweeping over the scene and the spill of her headlights. The woman didn't wave or signal. She just stared down the road ahead, a phone in her hand, thumb frozen, as if halfway through pressing a button. The child looked straight at Maria's truck, but their expression was almost blank, like someone thinking hard about something else entirely. Then they were behind her. Maria watched their reflections shrink in the passenger mirror until the hazard lights became 2 tiny blinking dots and then vanished. She made a mental note to mention the car when she had a signal again, just so highway patrol could check on them if they hadn't moved by then. People broke down all the time. It wasn't unusual. It was only the child's stillness that lingered with her for a few miles after. By mile 170, the road had settled back into its steady rhythm. The truck cruised along at a comfortable speed. The desert stretched endlessly, low and dark around her. Somewhere out there, coyotes might be padding between bushes. Owls might be gliding from post to post, but nothing touched the asphalt. She took a sip of coffee, checked her mirrors again, checked her gauges. All normal. Then, near mile 169, she saw the hazard lights again. 2 blinking points, low on the right shoulder. The exact same shade, the exact same rhythm. Her grip tightened on the wheel before she even consciously registered why. The sedan came into view, parked at the same angle on the shoulder. The trunk was slightly open, a bungee cord stretched in the same lazy arc. The driver's side door hung wide. The woman in the light blouse braced against it, the phone in her hand. The child in the yellow shirt and red backpack stood in the same place as before. Maria's breath caught in her throat. There were plenty of silver sedans on the road. Plenty of women with phones. Plenty of kids with school-colored backpacks. Coincidences happened all the time. And yet, she eased into the left lane again, heartbeat a little louder in her ears. As her truck drew level, she glanced quickly over. The woman's face was turned more toward her now. In the headlights, it looked oddly flat, like she was caught between expressions. The child's eyes met Maria's through the glass, dark and steady. Their mouth moved, as if starting to form a word, but the truck was already passing, and the sound, if there had been any, was eaten up by the engine. The scene slid into the mirrors, then out of them. Maria flicked a quick look at her GPS. According to the display, she'd been traveling steadily forward. No strange loops, no sudden circles, no turns. Mile markers backed that up too. She'd watched them drop, one by one. She checked her odometer. The numbers ticked up exactly as they should. Fatigue. She muttered to herself. Maybe she was more tired than she realized. Long straight roads could play tricks on the brain. It was easy to imagine repetition where there was none. To prove it to herself, she started counting the markers out loud. 168, 167, 166. The steady chant filled the cab, soft under the engine hum. At 160, she told herself she'd forgotten about the stranded car. She would see a different vehicle next, if she saw anything at all. A pickup, maybe, or nothing. Her eyes had just flicked to the 160 sign when the hazard lights appeared again. This time, they were between lanes. The sedan sat half on the right shoulder, half in the driving lane, forcing her to move fully over into the passing lane. Its rear end jutted more into traffic, as if whoever had parked it had lost control halfway through. Maria's jaw flexed. Same car, same trunk, same bungee, same woman, same child. Only now, the child wasn't looking at her truck at all. They were looking down, toward the road, at some point a few feet ahead of the front tire. The woman's hand was pressed flat to her cheek, like a person holding a phone that wasn't there. Every bit of training and instinct screamed at Maria to slow, to stop, to put her flashers on and get out and help. But something in that frozen scene, something in the stillness of the woman's hand, and the unnatural way the child's shoulders were hunched, made her hesitate. She passed them again, hazmat lights washing over their features in a stuttering pattern. In her mirrors, for just a moment, she thought she saw the child lift one hand and wave, not frantically, not begging, but slowly, like a tired person greeting someone they only half expected to see. Maria flipped on her phone screen at the next straight stretch and checked for signal. 1 bar. Faint, but enough. She tapped the number for dispatch. When the operator picked up, she spoke quickly, describing the car, the shoulder, the mile markers. She left out the part about seeing them more than once. She didn't feel like hearing her own words thrown back at her. "We don't have any incidents flagged in that area," the dispatcher said after a moment. "No breakdown calls, no flares. Could be they're handling it themselves. Want me to notify Highway Patrol anyway?" "Yeah," Maria said. "Please do. There's a kid with them. We'll pass it along." She ended the call, feeling only slightly better. The road continued to spill forward. The truck's cab felt smaller than it had earlier. The windshield more like a screen than a window. Her thoughts slipped back, uninvited, to another road and another shoulder. She had been 16 when her younger brother's bicycle had clipped a broken piece of curb and sent him into the edge of traffic one wet afternoon. The car that struck him had not been speeding, the driver had not been careless, and yet nothing anyone did afterward had been enough. She still remembered the terrible, fixed silence on his face in the hospital, the way the white sheets had looked too bright. Guilt was a strange thing. It found its way into places that made no sense at all. For years afterward, whenever she passed kids walking close to the road, some part of her wanted to pull over, to move them farther away herself, as if shifting them by inches would rewrite her own history. Now, with the desert pressing in, and the stars crowding the sky outside, she felt that old guilt mixing with new unease. Mille marqueur 150 slipped past. Then 149. The desert chilled a little. The vents blew cooler air. Off in the distance, a low bank of lighter darkness hinted at a dry riverbed or an old lava flow. At 147, the hazard lights appeared for the fourth time. This time, the sedan sat directly in her lane, not on the shoulder, not half and half, squarely across the driving lane with no time to pretend she hadn't seen it. Maria's foot moved to the brakes before her mind caught up. The truck slowed with a long, controlled sigh, air brakes humming, hazard lights flicking on by habit. She came to a full stop 50 feet away, her headlights flooding the scene with white. The woman stood behind the open driver's door, one hand on the roof, the other hovering an inch from her cheek. The child stood just in front of the car, toes almost touching the broken white lane marker, red backpack clutched to their chest. Around them, the desert lay still and quiet. Maria set the parking brake, took a breath, and opened her door. Warm night air washed over her as she climbed down from the cab. The sound of her own boots on the asphalt seemed louder than it should have been. There was no wind, no chirping insects, just the faint tick of the truck's cooling metal and the regular blink of her hazard lights reflecting off the back of the sedan. She approached slowly, one hand slightly raised, as if not to startle anyone. "Hey," she called, voice carrying oddly clear in the open space. "You folks okay out here?" No response. She moved closer. The woman's eyes were open, but they didn't track her. They stared slightly past Maria's left shoulder, pupils fixed on some point far away. Her thumb hovered over the dark screen of a phone, never touching, never pressing. "Ma'am?" Maria tried again, softer. The woman's lips parted, as if to answer. No sound came out. Her chest didn't rise or fall. Her shadow, cast by the truck's headlights, did not shift even a fraction. Maria's skin prickled. She turned to the child. Up close, the yellow of their shirt was a little faded, like something washed too many times. The red backpack had a small stain near the bottom corner, the shape of an old spill. The child's small fingers dug into the straps so tightly their knuckles looked pale. "What's going on?" Maria asked, crouching slightly to get on their level. "Did you break down?" The child lifted their head. Their eyes met hers, deep, dark, very awake. "You drove past us," the child said. The voice was quiet, but it carried through the night as clearly as if they were standing in a small room. There was no accusation in it, only a simple statement of fact. Maria swallowed. "I wasn't sure it was safe to stop on the highway. I called for help. Someone's coming." "You always say that," the child replied, blinking slowly. "You always drive past." The answer lodged under her ribs like a dropped stone. "How long have you been out here?" Maria asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. The child's gaze drifted past her, toward the big truck, its towers of light and shadow. "Since before the tow truck comes," they said. "We wait and wait. It takes a long time to get here." Maria glanced back at the woman, then at the car. Up close, she could see tiny details she hadn't noticed from the cab, the faint spiderweb of a crack in the rear window, the thin layer of dust along the lower door panels, as if they'd been driving through dry country roads all day. Her stomach turned. "Are you hurt?" she asked. "Is anyone inside the car?" The child shook their head. But the motion was strange, like a gesture remembered rather than performed. "We don't get to be hurt here," they said. "Only before, only after, not here." Maria's thoughts flinched away from that, as if from something too bright. "Listen," she said, choosing her words carefully. "I'm going to put out some flares, okay? And triangles. So nobody hits you guys. Then I'll—" "Please don't," the child interrupted, voice suddenly very small. "I don't like the lights when it happens. I don't like seeing it." The words sank into the air like stones dropped into still water. Maria's heart hammered. "What happens?" she asked, though she already knew she didn't want the answer. The child's eyes flicked toward the road ahead, to some invisible point in the lane, Their fingers tightened on the backpack straps. "You drove past us," they repeated. And then it happened. Behind Maria, her own truck sat idle, headlights pouring white beams over the scene. The hazard lights on the sedan blinked on and off, marking out silent seconds. She thought of every time she had seen a car on the side of the road and kept going because it seemed under control, because she was on a deadline, because stopping on the shoulder was risky. All the moments when she'd told herself that someone else would help. Something inside her shifted. "Not this time," she said quietly. She turned and jogged back to her cab, climbed up, and reached for the emergency kit. Flares, reflective triangles, high-visibility vest. Her fingers closed around them automatically. As she did, she glanced at the clock. The digits were frozen. Not ticking, not changing, just holding to one single minute, as if the truck had decided that time, at least around this strange patch of road, didn't quite apply. She grabbed what she needed anyway, and jumped back down. When her boots hit the asphalt, the air had changed. The hazard lights on the sedan were off. The steady blink of red and orange was gone. The rear lights sat dark and cold. The car itself looked different. The silver paint was dull, pitted by years of sun and sand. The trunk was no longer held by a bungee cord. It sagged unevenly on its hinges, lid half caved in. The woman was gone. The child was gone. Only the empty highway, the silent car, and the wide, watchful desert remained. Maria stood very still, emergency triangle in one hand, as if any sudden movement might start the scene up again. With careful steps, she approached the sedan. Closer, she saw that the windshield was cracked in long, radiating lines. Dust settled thick into every crevice. The license plate was an older style, a design that had been replaced years ago. A brittle parking stub on the dashboard bore a date smudged almost beyond reading. She squinted, heart thudding. The year was several summers in the past. She touched the hood with the back of her hand. It was cool, not just night cool, long cool, like metal that had been sitting unmoved for seasons. Somewhere far above, a breeze finally stirred, rustling dry plants at the edge of the road. A faint hum of tires reached her ears, the distant passing of a car miles away, separated by heat and distance, normal and unaware. The frozen moment had passed. Whatever she'd stepped into had let her go. Very carefully, Maria walked back to her truck, climbed into the cab, and sat behind the wheel. She took a long, slow breath, another. Her hand shook once as she released the parking brake. In her mirror, as she pulled away, the sedan grew smaller. In the white wash of her taillights, it looked like any other abandoned car at the edge of a lonely highway. Her phone buzzed against the dash. She glanced at the screen. A voicemail from Highway Patrol, time-stamped 30 seconds earlier. She tapped it and held the phone to her ear. "Ma'am," an even voice said, "we got a report from your dispatcher about a possible stranded vehicle around mile 180. Just wanted to let you know, we checked that stretch recently. The only thing out there is an old wreck off the embankment. Family of 2, single car incident quite a few years back. Nobody uses that shoulder much anymore. If you see anything current though, give us a call." The message clicked off. Maria drove on. The mile markers kept counting down. The road eventually curved. The faint glow of the next town rose on the horizon like a low, artificial sunrise. She finished her run, unloaded, slept, and picked up another haul the next day. But on certain nights, when the air is very still and the sky over the desert is crowded with stars, she finds herself thinking about a child in a yellow shirt and a red backpack, standing motionless at the edge of a lane. Since then, she keeps a small box behind her seat, bottled water, a few snacks, a pack of crayons, and a cheap coloring book. Things for stranded kids, she tells herself. Once, weeks afterward, on the same highway but many miles away, her headlights caught a brief, faint blink on the shoulder ahead, 2 small pulses of orange, there and gone. Her hands tensed on the wheel. When she drew closer, there was nothing there. Just a mile marker, half tilted, and an old tire mark fading into gravel. She passed, and the darkness closed around the beam of her lights again, leaving the desert to its secrets. Story number 3. The plains at night could convince a person that the world never ended. Out there, the land rolled so gently that the horizon seemed more like a fading thought than a line. Towns were set far apart, their glows rising in lonely islands of orange and white. Between them, The highway stretched straight as a promise, laid like a steel ruler over fields and sleeping farmhouses. Jonah had been on this route for years. He knew the long, quiet interstates that cut through the Midwest better than he knew his own neighborhood streets. He liked the open lanes, the low hum of his truck, the steady tick of the mile markers gliding by in the dark. That night, the air was clear and sharp. Moonlight spilled over the fields, turning irrigation pivots into thin silver skeletons reaching for the sky. The sky itself was high and empty, a flat black bowl pricked with a few cold stars. Jonah's rig rumbled southbound with a full trailer of packaged food. Nothing hazardous, nothing special. Just boxes and pallets that needed to be in another state by morning. His dashboard glowed with familiar colors. His coffee was hot. His favorite late-night playlist drifted low from the speakers. As he passed a rest area, the CB came to life. Convoy 7, a crisp male voice crackled. All units, be advised. Wind gusts picking up past mile 201. Maintain spacing and lights. Lead, confirm position. Jonah glanced at the radio, then at the empty lanes around him. CB chatter came and went on these roads, drivers joking, warning each other of speed traps or construction. But this didn't sound like any of that. It sounded official, clipped, and coordinated. An escort, maybe, for a wide load or military transport. He checked his mirrors. Only darkness and his own trailer lights. Lead, confirm, the voice repeated. Jonah Reyes, you got copy? Jonah's fingers tightened on the wheel. He hadn't given his name on the channel that night. His handle wasn't tied to his real name anyway. Company policy. And nobody who might be calling from dispatch would use the CB like that. He reached for the microphone slowly. This is southbound on 41, he said. If you're aiming for me, I'm solo out here. No convoy. You might have the wrong guy. The line hissed for a second. Then the same calm voice spoke again, unbothered. Convoy 7 acknowledged, it said. Unit 3 has visual on your trailer. Maintain speed. Do not deviate from route. We'll get you all through this. A faint chill ran down Jonah's back. He glanced out again. The lanes ahead were deserted. The rearview mirrors showed nothing but the straight white lines and the soft glow of his own taillights bouncing off the road. Unit 3, confirm, the voice added. You've got lead in sight? Another voice came through, filtered and distant, as if pushing through more static. Yeah, it said. Got him. He's lit okay. Tag still hanging. Just keep him straight. We don't need a repeat of last time. Jonah pressed the transmit button again, mouth dry. Breaker 1 to 9, he said, trying to sound more annoyed than unnerved. Whoever's playing around on this channel, cut it out. I'm alone on this road. Nobody's behind me. Silence. His radio light blinked twice, then steadied. No apology, no laughter, no sign that anyone had heard him at all. He flicked the CB off and let the music fill the quiet instead. Outside, a long freight train crawled parallel to the highway for a while, its cars clanking softly in the distance. Jonah watched the red lights on its last wagon vanish into the night and felt some of the tension ease out of his shoulders. Trains were simple, predictable, real. About 20 miles later, he turned the CB back on. The channel was calm. A couple of drivers traded notes about cheap fuel at an earlier exit. Someone else warned about a speed trap near a state line. Normal noise. He relaxed his grip on the wheel, flexing his fingers one at a time. An overhead sign flashed by, Way Station 2 miles. All trucks next right when flashing. The amber lights on the sign were dark. Closed then. Good. He was on schedule, and he didn't feel like slowing down for a scale tonight. The drone of tires and engine blended into a kind of lullaby. He breathed with it, letting his thoughts drift toward the next stop, the next cup of coffee, the next sunrise. Then, from somewhere in the persistent hum of machinery, a new sound threaded in. Click, 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 like turn signals, but wrong, too slow, too far away. He paused the music. For a moment, there was only his own blinker as he signaled to pass a slower car ahead. Tick, 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 clean and close. Then, faint beneath it, that other sound again. Out of sync. Click, click, almost like a row of indicators all being switched on at slightly different times. He checked his mirrors once more. The world behind him looked the same as always, flat, gray, and black, scored by lines of paint and distant fence posts. But something about the darkness felt more crowded than it had a few minutes earlier, as if shapes just below the level of sight were trying very hard to keep pace. He squinted, focusing on the far edge of his taillight glow. For a second, only a second, he saw a glint of chrome, like a grill catching his lights, like another truck's front end. Then the road dipped very slightly, and the glimpse disappeared. His heart rate picked up. He hadn't seen anyone come up on him. He'd checked the mirrors regularly. There was no way a rig big enough to reflect like that could have snuck into his blind spot without him noticing. The CB crackled. "Convoy 7, eyes up," the crisp voice said. "Station at mile 185 is active tonight. Everyone stays in formation. No surprises." Last time was enough of a mess. Jonah swallowed. He flicked his eyes to the mile marker as he passed it. "Ibabashalio. 1 more mile." He looked at the way station lights ahead. They were on. Bright amber bulbs flashed over the right lane, reflected in the metal guardrails. The large overhead sign that had been dark not long ago now blinked, "Wake Station Open. All trucks exit." His hands went cold. He knew this stretch. The station here had been closed for months for renovation. Drivers had been talking about it on and off. Concrete torn up. New scales going in. Absolutely. Definitely shut. Yet the building was lit like a centerpiece. The long, low structure sat beside the highway, its windows glowing a harsh, clean white. The entrance lanes were open. The green arrow above the scale lane pulsed steadily. Every instinct told him to stay on the main line and roll past. His training said otherwise. When the lights flashed, trucks exited. That was the rule. He hesitated just long enough to feel the truck drift, then snapped on his signal and guided the rig onto the off-ramp. As his front tires crossed the painted line into the station lanes, the air seemed to thicken, like driving into a light fog he couldn't see. His ears popped as if he'd changed altitude. The CB's normal chatter faded to a low, unreadable murmur. Up ahead, the digital speed sign lit up. 5 miles per hour. Proceed to scale when directed. The display flickered once, then steadied. For a heartbeat, the number looked wrong, 3 digits instead of 1, but then it settled back into a glowing, innocent 5. Jonah brought his rig down to a crawl. The station had multiple bays, but only one was lit. A green arrow hung above it. The others were dark, their lanes blocked off with orange cones and faded tape. In the white glare of overhead lamps, the concrete looked almost wet. "Convoy 7, maintain order," the CB voice said again, sounding closer now. "Lead, you're first up. The rest of you, hold positions. Don't crowd the scale." Jonah's mouth felt dry. "There is no convoy," he said aloud to no one. He rolled slowly toward the scale, following the painted line. His headlights washed over a thick glass window on the right. Behind it, in a small room filled with monitors and papers, a figure sat at a desk. The inspector wore a uniform shirt, sleeves rolled neatly to the elbows. His hair was dark, combed back. His hands rested lightly on the desk, one finger tapping an invisible rhythm. He looked precisely as an inspector might have looked in a training manual illustration, tidy, alert, almost bored. Only his eyes gave something away. He wasn't looking at his screens. He wasn't looking at any gauges. He was staring straight at Jonah's windshield, as though he'd been waiting for nothing but this truck, on this night. "Keep it straight," the second CB voice murmured, faint and scratchy. "He doesn't like it when they come in crooked." Jonah's stomach tightened. He eased his rig onto the scale. The suspension compressed with a soft groan. The digital display in front of him blinked to life, then scrambled, half showing numbers, half showing broken segments. 72914. The characters shifted, then froze on something unreadable. A small speaker at the side crackled. "Cut your engine," a calm voice outside said, though Jonah hadn't seen the inspector's lips move. "He hesitated." The voice came again, no louder, no harsher, but with the unspoken weight of routine behind it. "Engine off, driver." Jonah took a slow breath and turned the key. The big diesel power plant wound down, leaving an abrupt, almost shocking quiet. The fans ticked as they coasted. The cab settled a fraction of an inch lower. The world outside the windshield felt suddenly distant, as if he were watching it on a monitor instead of through glass. The inspector stood. Jonah hadn't seen him rise from the chair. He was just standing now, close to the window, a clipboard in his hand. The motion had been too smooth, too seamless, like a cut in a film. He gestured with 2 fingers for Jonah to step out. Jonah reached automatically for his logbook and company ID, then opened the door and climbed down, boots hitting the cool, smooth concrete. The lights made everything look slightly washed out. His truck's red paint seemed duller than usual. The reflective stripes on his trailer glowed with an almost painful intensity. He walked toward the office window. The inspector slid open a small panel at the bottom of the glass. "Evening," the man said. His voice matched the one from the speaker exactly. "Company name?" Jonah gave it. "Trailer loaded?" the inspector asked. "Yeah. Food product. Nothing special." The inspector nodded, eyes flicking to some point just to the left of Jonah's face instead of directly at him. His expression was neutral, not unfriendly. "Been through here before, haven't you?" he asked. "Not since they closed for construction," Jonah replied. For the first time, a small smile creased one side of the inspector's face. "We're always open for Convoy 7, he said quietly. Jonah's skin prickled. "I'm not part of a convoy," he said. "I'm alone on the road tonight." The inspector's gaze ticked, very slightly, toward the dark lanes beside Jonah's truck. "Step back to your cab for me," he said in the same even tone. "Wait inside until we clear you." Jonah opened his mouth to protest, then stopped. The air around him felt charged, like the thick stillness before a thunderstorm. The muscles in his neck went rigid without his consent. He nodded once and turned away. As he walked back toward his rig, he caught something at the very edge of his sight movement in the bay to his left, one of the supposedly closed ones. A faint shape, large and tall, like another truck easing onto another scale. He couldn't hear an engine. He didn't look directly. Every instinct screamed not to. He climbed into his cab and shut the door. From this angle, he could see part of the station building reflected in his side mirror. The inspector was still at his window, head turned slightly away. Behind Jonah's truck, in the dark lane, a set of clearance lights that had not been there before now glowed dim red. He watched them, not blinking. A trailer was sitting just behind him. No, not just behind, slightly through his own, the way 2 images can overlap on a screen. Its outline was vague, its lights dull, as if shining from very far away. On the CB, the second voice whispered again. "Just hold, 7, it said. "He's checking us one by one. We only get one shot at this." Jonah leaned forward and turned the radio knob with careful fingers. The display showed his usual channel, a faint hiss, nothing more. The voice had spoken without lighting the meter, as if it were slipping in through some gap between frequencies. He swallowed. "Convoy 7, the first voice said clearly now, as if addressing a group lined up neatly outside. "You know the drill. Keep your doors closed. Keep your eyes front. Don't talk to him unless he talks to you." From the corner of his eye, Jonah thought he saw movement in his passenger mirror, another rig pulling into the far lane, perfectly silent. Its cab looked older, like something from 2 decades back, with a rounded hood and a faded logo. For a heartbeat, its driver's side window caught the station light. Someone sat inside, or something that had been someone. The impression was fleeting. A profile, a cap, the suggestion of hollowed cheeks. Then the reflection wavered, and the lane was empty again. Jonah shut his eyes for a second, hard, as if that might reset what he was seeing. When he opened them, the inspector was standing beside his truck door. The man's face hovered just outside the glass, closer than seemed possible. Jonah startled, his heart jumping. The inspector didn't tap, he didn't motion. He simply watched Jonah through the window, eyes very clear, very steady. Up close, there was something wrong with his pupils. They looked too wide for the bright light, too deep. The fluorescent glare overhead should have shrunk them to pinpoints, but they remained dilated, like someone standing in a dark room. The CB hissed briefly. A breath, just that. "Don't open it," the second voice whispered. "Not all the way. Not this time." Jonah's hand had already closed on the door handle. He froze. Every training video, every handbook, every piece of common sense said he should comply with inspection requests. Refusing could cost him fines, citations, worse. But there was something about the way the inspector's lips hadn't quite moved when he spoke before, about the way the station had appeared open when it should be closed, that dug into his nerves. He cracked the window instead, just an inch. "Yes, sir?" he asked. The inspector's gaze shifted a fraction, focusing on Jonah's eyes now. "You're heavy on the back axle," he said calmly. "Slide your tandems forward 2 holes. Then you can go." Jonah almost laughed out of sheer relief. That was normal. That was textbook. A weight adjustment. A common, catchable issue. Something practical he could fix. He nodded quickly. "Yes, sir," he said. "I'll do that." The inspector didn't move away. "Be careful when you pull out," he added, tone unchanged. The others tend to follow the last one. A strand of hair at the back of Jonah's neck lifted. "Yes, sir," he repeated. He rolled the window back up and watched in the mirror as the inspector walked away. The man's steps were smooth, unhurried. He passed in front of Jonah's grill, then angled back toward the office. For a heartbeat, as he walked through the harsh overhead light, Jonah saw straight through part of him to the door beyond, like a reflection on glass viewed from the wrong angle. Then the effect vanished. The inspector stepped into the office, closed the door, and sat down at his desk once more, a clipboard in hand, as if nothing had changed. The scale's front display flickered, then flashed green. "Clear," the speaker crackled. "Convoy 7, you're good," the first voice said. "All units, roll out in order. No lane changes until you're back on the line." Jonah turned the key. The engine roared back to life with an almost comforting shake. The familiar vibrations settled around him. He eased off the brake and let the truck roll slowly forward, then off the scale. As his rig moved, he checked his mirrors again. In the darkness behind his trailer, for 3 or 4 seconds, there was a procession. Trucks that were not there and yet were, sliding in perfect formation past the station. Old models, newer models, faded company logos, long-gone paint schemes. Some looked nearly transparent, as if cut from thin smoke. Others seemed solid until you realized their wheels never quite touched the ground. Drivers sat in each cab, faces pale in the glow of unseen dashboards. Some watched the road straight ahead. Some stared sideways at Jonah's truck, as if trying to memorize its lines. They kept perfect distance from one another. Then Jonah's trailer cleared the scale lane, and the effect snapped like a string. His mirrors showed only his own taillights again, reddening the pavement. He merged back onto the interstate. As soon as his tires hit the main line, the station behind him went dark. Not gradually. Not with lights clicking off one by one, all at once. The bright windows winked out. The overhead lamps blinked off. The flashing amber sign on the highway cut to black. 1 second, the place blazed like an exam room. The next, it was an empty, silent building squatting in the night. Jonah's breath hitched. He drove for a long time without touching the CB knob. Eventually, curiosity wore down his silence. He switched channels, listening. The usual talk filled the air again. Weather, detours, jokes. No organized convoy calls. No crisp commands. No mention of Convoy 7. At the next truck stop, he pulled in for fuel. The attendant, a middle-aged man in a faded cap, leaned on the pump while the tank filled. "Scales back there still closed?" he asked casually. "They've been working on that place forever." Jonah paused. "When you say back there, you mean at mile 185? He asked. "Yeah," the man said. "Nothing but barricades and dust. Some kind of big wreck on that stretch a while back. Before your time, probably. Whole convoy went sideways in bad weather. They rebuilt half the interchange and shut the station down to redo the equipment. Haven't opened it since." Jonah swallowed, feeling the cooled metal of the fuel nozzle under his fingers. "Convoy?" he asked quietly. The man nodded, looking out toward the highway. "Big one," he said. "Dozen trucks or more. Some folks around here still talk about it. They say if you're out there on the right kind of night, you can hear a whole line of Jake brakes in the fog, with nothing on the road at all." He chuckled once, a dry sound. "Superstitious stuff. Keeps bored kids scared. Anyway, watch your hours. They're strict as anything these days." He handed Jonah the receipt and moved on to the next customer. Back in his cab, Jonah sat for a moment with the engine idling, hands loose on the wheel. The road was still out there, waiting, stretching ahead into the night. Trucks rose and fell on the overpass beyond the lot. Taillights and headlights traded places. He flipped the CB to a rarely used channel, just static. He almost turned it back off. Then, soft as a breath over glass, a familiar second voice slid into the noise. "You stayed in line," it said. "Good. That's one less we have to watch for." Jonah's throat tightened. "Who are you?" he asked, barely above a whisper. "What convoy is this?" There was a long pause. When the voice returned, it sounded distant again, muffled by layers of weather and time. "Just keep straight when they tell you to," it said. "We didn't. That's all." The static folded in on itself, then faded. Jonah pulled out of the truck stop and merged back onto the highway. The lane lines glowed under his headlights, ordinary and unwavering. The planes rolled quietly on either side. He kept his speed steady. He kept his eyes on the road. And as the closed, dark bulk of the way station finally crept into view once more in the distance, he didn't look at it long enough to see if any of its windows were glowing. Story number 4. The night Ethan took the detour over the ridge, the weather couldn't quite make up its mind. Sometimes the rain came in sheets, drumming hard enough on the windshield to blur the world into streaks of gray. Other times it thinned to mist and clung to the glass like breath. Fog gathered and scattered along the mountains, curling through the trees in slow, pale ribbons. His truck's headlights tunneled through it, painting damp asphalt and reflective posts. The main interstate had shut down a few hours earlier because of a rockslide miles ahead, forcing all southbound traffic onto an older 2-lane route that wound over the hills like a forgotten thought. Ethan had been hauling long enough to know that mountain detours at night could eat up time and focus. His electronic log on the dash ticked steadily down, showing he had less than an hour of drive time left before he'd have to park. Dispatch had told him there was an official rest area about 30 miles past the detour, just on the other side of the ridge. "Plenty of room there," the night dispatcher had said. "Folks will be stacking up from the closure, but you should make it." He believed that when the sky was still clear, as the climb grew steeper and the curves tighter, he began to doubt. The road's little green mile markers counted up instead of down, unfamiliar numbers on an unfamiliar route. A battered sign on the shoulder declared, "Summit 8 miles. Beside it, another warned, "Trucks check brakes." Ethan sipped lukewarm coffee and rolled his shoulders, resisting the urge to rub at his eyes. The cab's warm air made him drowsy. He cracked his window an inch to let in the cool, damp night. The CB had gone mostly quiet once he left the interstate. A few drivers had grumbled about the detour, but as the road narrowed, even that faded. People were concentrating. Out here, there wasn't room for much else. The rain eased again, turning to a fine mist that drifted in the beams like smoke. The forest on either side pressed close, dense with dark trunks and wet leaves that shone faintly whenever the headlights caught them. Around a sharp left curve, Ethan passed a small temporary sign on a stand. "Rest area closed. Next services 68 miles. He frowned. His log's countdown flashed at him. 0:38. He could squeeze a few more miles with careful driving, but he wasn't going to make 68, not legally, and not safely. This wasn't flatland, where you could push your luck and roll gently into the next town. He considered pulling onto the shoulder to nap, but the idea of sleeping with his trailer half hanging over a drop or too close to a blind corner didn't sit right. He drove on, hoping for a wide gravel turnout, a truck-friendly pull-off, anything. 5 more miles up, the road straightened just a little. The fog thinned to a damp haze. Ethan's eyes caught a sign he hadn't seen listed on his app or GPS. A rectangular board rose from the right shoulder, green paint darkened by years of weather. Summit View, Overlook, 1/4 mile. Below the name, in smaller white letters, "Truck parking okay, no camping." He glanced at his GPS. The screen showed only the twisting 2-lane and blank gray around it. No overlook symbol. No pull-off. Still, the sign had looked official enough, and his timer kept ticking. At the 1/4 mile mark, the road widened and a smooth, paved lane branched right. Low stone walls lined its edges. A small building with a peaked roof sat near the far end of what looked like a long parking area. In the wet glare of his headlights, the asphalt shone dark and freshly sealed. Ethan flicked on his turn signal and guided the rig into the overlook. The rain had stopped altogether here. The air felt oddly still, as if someone had pressed pause on the weather. The engine's rumble bounced off the trees and the stone wall, making the lot sound more enclosed than it was. He rolled to a stop along the outer edge, parallel with the low wall that separated the pavement from a drop into darkness. Beyond that, somewhere down in the fog, The valley waited. He set the parking brake. The familiar hiss and clunk settled through the cab. Almost at once, the quiet rushed in. No wind in the trees, no patter of leftover raindrops from leaves. Just the gentle ticking of the cooling engine and the faint hum of his dash electronics. He peered out the side window. The overlook was empty. There were no other trucks, no cars. The building near the center of the lot, bathrooms and vending machines, if he had to guess, glowed with a steady yellowish light behind frosted windows. A single lamppost lit the middle of the pavement, but the edges faded quickly into gray. Ethan checked his phone. No service, but the time showed just after 1:40 a.m. His low timer blinked at 04:02. He could legally drive a few more minutes, but it wouldn't get him anywhere better than this. And the lot, at least, was wide and level. He could pull his curtain, catch some sleep, and hit the road at dawn when the fog thinned. He filled out the quick-duty status change, switched on his sleeper berth, and killed the headlights. The cab dimmed to a soft, bluish glow from the dash. For a moment, he just sat and listened. The stillness was different. Not just quiet in the normal sense. It had a thickness to it, like being inside a heavily insulated room. Sound from the outside world didn't seem to reach him at all. He shook the feeling off, climbed into the sleeper, and stretched out. Years on the road had taught him how to fall asleep almost anywhere. Somewhere between one breath and the next, his thoughts slipped loose. He wasn't sure how much time had passed when the sound of another engine woke him. A low, distant growl rose through the floor of the cab. It grew quickly, the way another semi's presence always did, a deepening rumble, the soft whine of tired brakes, a faint rattle passing over seams in the pavement. Ethan blinked and checked the dim red glow of his dash clock through the curtain gap. 2:17 a.m. He swung his legs down, pushed the curtain aside a few inches, and peered into the mirror. A set of headlights swept across the trees and the low stone wall, then straightened as a truck rolled into the lot. Its clearance lights glimmered orange. Its chrome caught the lamppost glow. The rig pulled in next to his, leaving a respectable space between them. It was an older cab-over model, the kind you didn't see much anymore, with boxy lines and a faded blue stripe along the cab. A company name was painted on the door in peeling white letters he couldn't quite read from the angle. The other truck's engine idled a little rough, the pattern of its cylinders uneven, like someone breathing in their sleep. A faint thread of music drifted across tinny far away, some old rock song that might have been playing from a weak radio inside the cab. Relieved to see another human presence up here, Ethan considered getting down to say hello, maybe swap a few words about the detour. He hesitated. Waking someone in the middle of their off-duty wasn't usually welcome. He settled for watching a moment longer. The blue-striped cab sat steady. No door opened. No figure moved in front of the windshield. After a minute, he let the curtain fall and lay back down. Sleep tugged at him almost immediately. He drifted, the low idle of the other truck a kind of reassurance in the background. When he woke again, it felt like no time had passed at all. His eyes snapped open with that strange, alert feeling that didn't match how his body felt. He reached for his phone, squinting at the screen. 2:17 a.m. He frowned. The dash clock, when he peered through the gap, showed the same time. The seconds ticked, but the minutes did not change. Outside, the other rig's idle hummed on. Ethan sat up fully this time and pulled the curtain back. The lot was empty. No blue-striped truck, no idle, no thread of music. Just the lamppost, the wet shine of the pavement, and the dim outline of the restroom building. He rubbed a hand over his face. He could have dreamed the other truck. It wouldn't be the first time a half-sleeping brain had stitched engine noises into some believable scene. Still, he felt more awake than that explanation should allow. He slipped on his shoes and jacket and climbed down from the cab. The air outside was cool and damp, but still oddly windless. His breath puffed just faintly in front of him. The silence wrapped around his footsteps like a thick blanket. He walked toward the building. The lights inside the frosted windows burned steady, but when he tried the door, it didn't budge. Locked. A small clock mounted on the inner wall, just visible through the glass, showed the time as 2:17. He watched it for a long moment. The second hand moved, ticking smoothly around the face. The minute hand did not. He backed away slowly and turned to look over the lot. His own truck loomed where he had left it, dark red in the lamplight. Beyond it, The asphalt stretched empty to the tree line. Far below, in the valley, he expected to see the orange-white glow of the distant highway. Instead, there was only a low smear of fog and darkness. The sense of being very slightly detached from the world sharpened. He went back to the truck, climbed in, and shut the door carefully. The cab felt safer than the open lot, even if he couldn't have said why. He sat behind the wheel, not yet ready to lie down again. The CB, which he'd left turned off, gave a soft crackling pop. The display stayed dark. No channel number, no lit bar. Just that one quick burst of static, like air escaping. Then a man's voice spoke, very faint, as though coming from another room. "Summit View," it said. "You're stopping there too, huh?" Ethan's fingers hovered over the radio knob. He hadn't keyed the mic. The power indicator wasn't on. The sound seemed to be seeping through anyway. He turned the CB on fully. The screen bloomed to life. Channel 19. A hiss of normal static, nothing else. He swallowed. Before he could chalk it up to imagination, the speaker muttered softly again. "Don't leave on the second wind," the faint voice added. "That's when it gets most of us." The words were calm, almost conversational, but they sank straight through his chest like cold water. "Who is this?" Ethan asked, finding his own voice, though he hadn't picked up the mic. "You parked up here tonight?" No reply. The static rolled on, bland and normal. He listened for another minute, then reached up and turned the volume all the way down. The faint hiss muted, but the feeling it had carried stayed. "Second wind," he murmured, trucker slang for that dangerous burst of alertness that sometimes hit after hours of exhaustion when you felt strangely sharp, convinced you could push through, just before your body crashed for good. He checked his log. His off-duty counter had barely moved. It showed 11 minutes of rest. His phone, stubbornly, still claimed it was 2:17. If he left now, he could still get some miles in before the system flagged him. He could be down the grade before dawn traffic picked up. A stronger, quieter part of him thought of slick pavement on a steep descent, of fog banks hiding tight curves, of signs warning trucks use low gear, and of something else, unnamed but insistent, that made his hands feel heavy. He drew the curtain fully across the windshield, shutting out the view of the lamppost and the lot. Back in the sleeper, he lay down and closed his eyes, not in the scattered, half-ready way he sometimes did when he meant to wake up quick, but with deliberate intent. Deep breaths, shoulders letting go of their tension. Minutes or something like them passed. He drifted into a gray, surface-level kind of sleep, in which every tiny sound bobbed him up again. Somewhere outside, another truck pulled in. This time he didn't look. He heard the low thrumming through the floor, the shift of weight on the lot. A door creaked. Footsteps crossed damp asphalt. A cough. A muttered comment that he couldn't quite catch. Then, very near his own door, a soft knock. "Hey, driver," a man's voice called quietly. "You up? You got any jumper cables? Dead batteries over here." Every instinct in Ethan pulled toward answering. Helping stranded drivers was as natural as sharing road reports. But the hair on his arm stood up. He stayed still. The knock came again, a little more insistent. "Come on, man," the voice said. "Don't make me wake the whole lot. Just need a quick jump before I roll down. My kid's waiting on me in the morning." His throat tightened around that last detail. He thought of his own niece, of dropped promises and late arrivals, of all the reasons drivers pushed themselves too hard. The tip of one boot shifted under the bunk, a tiny, involuntary move. The boards didn't creak. The mattress barely sighed. But the knock stopped. For a few seconds, there was nothing. Then the voice spoke again, right next to the door. "Oh," it said softly. "You heard us this time." The footsteps moved away without another sound. Ethan's heart pounded so hard he could feel it against the mattress. He didn't open the curtain. He didn't check the mirror. He lay there, counting his breaths, until a pale gray began to seep into the edges of the sleeper, the first hint of dawn. Somewhere outside, a bird called, a small, ordinary trill. Then another answered from a different tree. The silence broke around those simple sounds. Leaves rustled as a breeze finally stirred. Far below, faint and distant, came the soft, continuous rush of cars on the main highway, like the sound of the ocean in a shell. He pushed himself up and looked at his phone. 4:52 a.m. The dash clock matched. His off-duty timer showed just over 3 hours gone. He pulled back the curtain. The lot was empty again. No oil spots where another truck might have parked. No fresh tire tracks in the thin sheen of moisture on the pavement. The lamppost stood a little less bright now in the early light. The building's windows glowed dully. Ethan climbed down and stepped outside. This time, the world felt right. Cool air touched his face. The valley below lay visible in layers of blue and gray, with a silver ribbon of interstate running through it. Headlights and taillights flowed along that line, tiny and normal. He walked to the stone wall and looked over. Farther down the mountain, near a sharp bend where warning signs clustered, he could just make out the scarred patch of guardrail where something large had gone through once. The metal had been repaired, but the color didn't quite match. He stared at that spot a long moment, then went back to his truck. 10 minutes later, with a fresh cup of coffee steaming in the holder and his log marked, he eased out of the overlook and back onto the winding road. As he descended the grade, low gear doing its work, he passed a weathered, half-hidden sign nailed to a tree. Not a truck stop, no services, do not park on grade. At the first fuel station in the valley, an older driver at the next pump nodded at him. "You come over the ridge last night?" the man asked. "Road's a mess up there sometimes." "Yeah," Ethan said. "Stopped at a pull-off near the top. Summit View, I think it was called." The other driver's face changed. "That place is still open?" he asked quietly. Ethan hesitated. "There's a marked overlook," he said. "Lot was empty, but the facilities look new." The man shook his head slowly. "They closed that overlook after a string of bad wrecks on the downgrade," he said. "Years back now. Folks kept overrunning their hours, napping up there, then chasing their second wind down the hill. Didn't always make it. Heard they blocked it off." Ethan pictured the smooth, clean pavement, the lit windows, the frozen clock on the wall. "Maybe they reopened it," he murmured. "Maybe," the man said, though his tone suggested he didn't believe it. He glanced out toward the mountains. "Funny thing, drivers used to say if you fell asleep up there on a bad night, you'd hear people knocking on your cab, asking for help they never got before they went over. Never really put stock in it myself." He shrugged. "Road stories. Keeps you awake." Ethan finished fueling, climbed back into his truck, and pulled onto the highway. As the valley widened and the mountains eased into hills behind him, he kept catching himself glancing at the clock, at the mirror, at the trees that lined the road. He didn't hear the strange voice on the CB again, but for a long time afterward, whenever the urge to push through exhaustion rose in his chest, he remembered the quiet of that overlook, the frozen minute on the clock, and the soft knock at his door. And on nights when the weather was indecisive and the fog curled low along the ridges, he stayed on the main line, no matter how tempting an unmarked pull-off might look. Story number 5. The rain had settled into a steady, half-hearted drizzle by the time Kate crossed the state line. It wasn't the kind of storm that demanded your attention. No thunder, no lightning, just a fine mist on the windshield that the wipers brushed away in lazy arcs. The highway ahead shimmered black under the thin veil of water, lane lines bright and sharp in her headlights. Midnight had come and gone an hour earlier. The distant glow of the last city had faded into the rear view, leaving only scattered farm lights and the occasional cluster of houses far off the road. Out here, the interstate ran straight and alone, a concrete river cutting through fields that wouldn't show their shapes until morning. Kate's stomach growled softly. Her plan had been to stop at a big-name truck plaza 2 exits back. She'd been aiming for their all-night diner and a real meal instead of the granola bars in her side pocket. But when she got there, the lot had been packed, every space taken. Trucks wedged in anywhere they could fit, hazard lights blinking red across the asphalt. A handwritten sign duct-taped to the entrance door had read "Diner closed, short-staffed." So she'd kept rolling. Her clock said she had a little over an hour left before she needed to park. Enough time to find something smaller than a full plaza. A fuel station with a side lot and some kind of hot food. That was what she told herself as the miles slid by. The drizzle made everything outside the truck feel more distant, as if the world beyond the glass were part of a slightly out-of-focus movie. The GPS mounted on her dash cheerfully announced, "Continue straight for 112 miles. Then fell silent. Kate reached for her thermos, took a swallow of coffee that had gone lukewarm, and checked the road signs ahead. One of them stood out. Service Center 1 mile, it read. Exit 212. No brand logos underneath. No little gas pump symbols. Just those 2 words in plain white letters on a dark green board. Her GPS didn't react. The map showed the exit ramp, but no fuel icons, no restaurant markers. Just empty gray where a business should have been. She frowned. Could be an old state-run rest area, she thought. The kind with vending machines, maybe a darkened snack bar, and a handful of parallel truck spots. Not much, but better than nothing. The next sign appeared just beyond the first. Harbor Truck TR, Diesel, Hot Meals, and Half Mile. The paint was older on this one. The letters had faded a little. A small arrow pointed neatly toward the right. Her GPS still showed nothing at that location. No truck center, no fuel. Then, ahead through the rain, she saw the glow. Off to the right, down a gently curving exit, a low building shone against the drizzle. Neon letters traced its roofline in a pale blue script. Harbor Lights. Truck Plaza. The last letter of plaza flickered on and off with lazy irregularity. Rows of tall light poles ringed a wide lot. Their halos smeared slightly in the mist, but their beams cut clear enough to show fuel islands and the outline of a diner with big front windows. Kate's hesitation lasted only a moment. Her turn signal clicked loudly in the cab as she eased onto the exit ramp. The road down to the plaza felt newly paved under her tires, smooth and even. White stripes marking lanes gleamed as if they'd been painted that afternoon. The rain slackened as she descended, the wipers scraping only an occasional bead of water now. The main building rose larger as she approached. 2 stories of glass and concrete with a sloping metal roof. An old-fashioned lighthouse shape, more decorative than functional, protruded from one corner, its own small beacon spinning slowly. Kate rolled past the fuel islands. The pump design was older than what she was used to. Wide metal bodies with analog dials and hose cradles powered by actual metal levers, not touchscreens. A canopy covered them, its underside a slightly yellowed white. 2 trucks sat in the lot. One, a long-nosed Peterbilt with a faded red cab, was parked along the far edge, engine off, curtains drawn. The other, a square-o-faced cabover painted a dull green, idled near the building, its clearance lights a steady orange line. No logos, she recognized. No modern branding. She pulled into a space near the front, left the engine running for a moment, and checked her phone. No service. Her clock read 12:47 a.m. She shut the truck down, listened to the engine spin down and settle, then grabbed her wallet and hopped down into the damp air. The drizzle had stopped entirely here. The air smelled of wet asphalt, and something else, old coffee and fryer oil, the kind of scent that clung to busy diners. The front doors opened smoothly under her hand. Inside, the truck plaza could have been a snapshot from another decade. Wood-paneled walls. A wide, long counter with chrome stools. Booths with red vinyl seats. A jukebox against the far wall glowed with soft-colored light. The menu above the kitchen pass was done in sliding plastic letters. A bell over the door chimed lightly as it closed behind her. A few people were scattered through the booths. At one table, a heavy-set man in a denim jacket sat alone with his hands folded around a mug, staring at nothing. At another, a woman in a flannel shirt and ball cap rested her head on her arm, an untouched plate of eggs in front of her. 2 older men occupied stools at the counter, shoulders hunched as if against some invisible draft. They all looked up when Kate entered, not in the quick, curious way of people startled awake, but with slow, synchronized motions, as though they'd been expecting someone and were checking to see if she was the right one. A waitress approached from behind the counter. Her uniform was the kind Kate associated with half-remembered family road trips. Pale blue dress, white apron, a small name tag that simply read Linda in black letters. Her hair was pinned back in a neat bun. A pencil tucked behind one ear looked unused. "Coffee?" Linda asked, already reaching for a mug. "Please," Kate said. "Sit wherever you like," the waitress added. "Menus the same as always." Kate chose a booth with a clear view of the lot through the big front windows. From there, she could see her truck's shape in the glow of the pole lights, dark and solid and reassuring. She slid into the seat. The vinyl made a soft squeak that echoed louder than it should have in the high-waslinged room. Linda set a thick white mug down and poured. The coffee was dark and smelled strong. "Kitchen closes for hot plates at 2, the waitress said. "Grill's still on till then. After that, it's just pie and whatever's left under the warmer." Kate glanced at her watch again. 12:49. "Plenty of time," she said. "Can I get a grilled cheese and fries?" Linda nodded and scribbled something on her pad. "Coming right up." As the waitress walked away, Kate noticed something. The wall clock above the kitchen window said 12 to 49. Its second hand ticked, smooth and even. The minute hand climbed toward the 1. Nothing seemed wrong about it at first glance. A small CB unit sat at the end of the counter, a dusty microphone hanging loosely on its clip. The speaker emitted a low, constant hiss, undercut by faint chatter, half-heard trucker voices, fragments of call signs, the soft crackle of someone laughing at a joke Kate couldn't quite make out. She sipped the coffee. It was the right temperature. Not scalding, not lukewarm. Something about the taste felt familiar, like diner coffee she had drunk 100 times before and never thought about. The man in the denim jacket stood and moved to the counter, leaving his mug. As he passed her booth, he nodded once. "You new to this run?" he asked. "First time through this corridor at night," Kate said. "Didn't even know this place was here." The man's eyebrows lifted slightly. "Not many do," he said. "Not these days." He took a stool 2 seats down from the older men, leaving a bit of space, and wrapped his hands around a fresh cup that appeared in front of him as if Linda had already anticipated his move. Kate watched the waitress move. Her steps were efficient, unhurried. There was no order pad hanging at her waist, yet plates appeared when they were needed, coffee mugs refreshed without being overtly checked. Whenever Kate tried to see if Linda's reflection showed clearly in the big front windows, her glance slid off at the last second, interrupted by the wobbling neon of the sign outside. Her grilled cheese arrived, golden and crisp, fries piled high. "Let me know if you need anything else," Linda said. Kate ate. The food was better than she expected. Not gourmet, but solid. The fries were hot all the way through, no half-frozen centers. The sandwich cheese stretched and melted in the right way. She kept half her attention on the window. Outside, the lot looked deeper somehow. The 2 trucks she had seen on her way in still sat where they had been. But every so often, out at the edges of the lights, she thought she saw the outline of more. Shapes that might be cabs, their edges blurred by drizzle and distance. Occasional flashes of reflective tape that didn't quite line up with any truck she could count. On the wall beside her booth, a corkboard held a messy array of Polaroids and faded photos. She'd seen similar boards in other stops, pictures of regulars, announcements, lost-to-found notices. Out of habit, she leaned closer. Most of the photos showed trucks. All different kinds, all different years. Some were clearly decades old, their colors washed out, their corners curling. Handwritten notes sprawled across them in blue or black ink. Ray, Iv 80, 1994, finally made it home. Jess, Nolan, Summer Run 02. Big Mike, last trip. A few of the notes carried dates. Some of those dates were very obviously from the past. Others were smeared enough to be hard to read. Her eye snagged on one near the middle. The picture showed a red Freightliner Cascadia angled in front of a fuel island. Company logo on the door. Trailer white with blue striping. Headlights off. Clearance lights glowing. It was her model, her paint scheme, her company. The number stenciled on the cab door matched hers, right down to the last digit. Someone had scrawled under the photo, "Kate, first time through. Good luck on the nightline." The date was there too. It was next week. She stared at it for a long, suspended second, the slice of grilled cheese halfway to her mouth. Her heart gave a single, heavy thump. Then she set the sandwich down, wiped her fingers slowly, and stood. Linda was at the counter, wiping the same spot over and over with a clean white cloth. She looked up as Kate approached. "Everything all right with the food?" she asked. "It's good," Kate said. "I was just curious. That board over there." She tilted her head toward it. "How old are some of those pictures?" Linda's gaze drifted past her, to the corkboard. "Oh, that old thing," she said. "Goes back as far as folks remember. We don't take many new ones anymore. Not as many drivers stop." "Do you know who put up the one with the red Freightliner?" Kate asked. "The one labeled Kate." Linda's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "We like to keep track of who comes through," she said. "Helps with the routes." "The routes?" "Some roads repeat themselves if you're not careful," Linda said mildly. "Especially at night." One of the older men at the counter chuckled without humor. "Means don't get lost on purpose," he said, not turning around. "Road doesn't like that. That's when you end up back here." "Back where?" Kate asked. The denim-jacketed man glanced at her then, properly meeting her eyes. "You ever keep driving past the point you should have parked?" he asked, "and realize you don't remember the last 15 miles? "Yes," Kate said quietly. "And you ever feel like there's a place the road wants you to turn into?" he went on. "Even when nothing's on your GPS?" She thought of the first green sign. The Plains Service Center, as if waiting there in the dark. "Yes," she said again. He nodded, as if that confirmed something he'd already decided. "Some nights," he said, "this place is just coffee and pie. Other nights, it's where you wash up when you've missed your chance to stop. You're here early." Kate's hand tightened on the back of the stool. "I'm just here for food," she said. "I'm still on my hours. I'll be back on the interstate in 20 minutes. The waitress watched her, expression unreadable. "You should be," Linda said. "You've got exits left, like I said." "I don't remember you saying that," Kate replied. "You will," Linda murmured, "if you keep us on your route." Something about the wording made the air feel thinner. Kate reached for her wallet. "How much do I owe you?" she asked. $8.50, Linda said without checking a register. Kate counted out a 10 and a 1 from the bills she kept for tolls in smaller places. Linda took them, opened an old-fashioned cash drawer with a ding that sounded almost too perfect, and made change. The receipt printer beside the register spit out a narrow strip of paper. Linda tore it off and handed it to her along with the coins. "Coffee to go?" she offered. "On the house. Take it for the road." Despite everything, the offer of caffeine was tempting. Kate nodded. "Sure," she said. Linda filled a styrofoam cup, capped it, and wrote something on the lid with a marker. "Don't follow taillights tonight," the waitress said as she passed it over. "Trust your own beams." Kate didn't look at the lid yet. Outside, the lot seemed slightly dimmer than it had when she'd come in. The neon on the sign flickered in longer intervals, blue letters going dark for 2, 3 seconds at a time before winking back. Her truck sat where she'd left it. For a moment, as she walked toward it, she had the strange impression that the other rigs in the lot had moved a few inches closer, like chairs around a table. She climbed into the cab, set the coffee in the holder, and shut the door. The relative quiet of the cab wrapped around her. Her dashboard clock read 12:52 a.m. She stared at it. By her sense of time, she'd been inside for at least half an hour. She pulled out her log app. Her status showed a brief on-duty break. 3 minutes. Her stomach tightened. Very slowly, she picked up the styrofoam cup and looked at the lid. In thick black letters, neat but a little cramped, someone had written, "See you when you're ready." Underneath, in smaller letters, "Next time, don't drive past." Her CB, which she'd left on a low volume, crackled. "Harbor inbound," a man's voice said faintly in the background. "Coffee's still hot." "Yeah, if you can find it," another answered, his tone half amused, half resigned. "It finds you, more like." Kate turned the knob until the sound clicked off. Her finger hovered over her GPS display. The map showed her parked in the middle of an empty field. The interstate line glowed to the left, rerouting option blinking impatiently. Return to highlighted route. She put the truck in gear, signaled, and rolled slowly toward the lane that led back to the ramp. As she turned, she glanced once in the side mirror. For just an instant, the parking lot behind her was full. Trucks stacked neatly in rows, nose to tail. Old models, new ones. Names she recognized. Logos she didn't. Cabs with curtains shut. Cabs with faint faces at the glass. Then the view shivered, like heat over asphalt, and the lot was nearly empty again, just the red Peterbilt and the green cabuover holding their places under the mist. She eased up the ramp. As her rig climbed back toward the interstate, the drizzle picked up again, pattering lightly on her windshield. At the top, she merged left, the familiar feel of the highway beneath her tires a strange comfort. She checked the mirror for the harbor light sign. There was no building behind her. No neon, no lamp poles. Just a darkened, overgrown patch of land with the faint outline of a crumbling foundation, lit briefly by her taillights as she passed. Her phone chimed softly. Service bars blinked to full. A notification from her mapping app popped up. Restaurants near you. 24 Your Diner. Exit 230. She drove on. At the next real truck stop, sometime after 2, she pulled in to top off her fuel. The plaza was bright, bustling even at that hour. Televisions above the counter flashed weather and headlines. The card readers beeped and chimed. While her tank filled, she mentioned the Harbor Lights place to the fuel desk clerk, as casually as she could. "Down by 212? She asked. "You ever stop at Harbor Lights Truck Plaza?" The clerk, a younger guy with a ring through one eyebrow, frowned. "Harbor Lights?" he repeated. "You mean that old lot by the creek?" "I mean the plaza with the diner," Kate said. "Neon sign, lighthouse on the corner." He shook his head. "That place burned down before I was born," he said. "My granddad used to tell stories about it. Said it was the last hot coffee he had before he fell asleep at the wheel on a long haul. Wrecked his rig just past the ramp." He snorted lightly. "They never rebuilt it. Nothing out there now but concrete and weeds." Kate didn't argue. Back in her truck, she dug the receipt from Harbor Lights out of her pocket. In the clean white light of her dome lamp, the print was faded, as though it had been in her wallet for years. The date at the top read AUG 14, 1999. The time said 12:49 amperes. The name on the server line was Linda. She folded the slip carefully and tucked it into the logbook she kept under the seat. On nights after that, when drizzle blurred the windshield and unmarked green signs offered nameless service centers, Kate kept careful track of her hours. She stopped when she should, not 3 exits later. She watched for taillights that seemed too eager to be followed. And every once in a while, far out between towns where the road and sky felt closer than they should, her CB would hiss, and someone, somewhere, would say quietly, "Coffee's on at the harbor if you missed your turn." She never took that exit again, but she kept the receipt, edges wearing soft over the years, as a reminder that some places on the road didn't show up on any map until you'd already gone too far. Story number 6. The snow had been falling steadily for hours, turning the world outside Aaron's windshield into shifting white. It wasn't a blizzard. Exactly, visibility was better than that, but the flakes were thick enough that his high beams only made things worse. He kept them on low, letting the lamps carve a narrow, yellow tunnel through the night. The northern highway he was on didn't see much traffic in winter. It cut through deep forest and low mountains, connecting a few lumber towns and mining sites before turning south again. Most of the summer tourists were long gone. The only vehicles out now were plows, locals, and trucks like his. The CB had been mostly quiet for the last 50 miles. Even the usual late-night chatter had died down. The dispatcher at his company had warned him at the start of the shift that weather advisories were in effect, but no closures yet. If he kept his speed careful and his hours honest, he'd be parked before dawn. He rolled his shoulders, easing some of the tension out. The heater hummed gently. The snow hissed against the cab in a soft, constant whisper. He checked his mirrors more out of habit than any real expectation. For a while there was nothing behind him but swirling white and the faint shadow of his own trailer edges. Then, at some point after mile marker 142, a pair of headlights bloomed in the distance. They were faint at first, just 2 pale coins behind the veil of snow. As the minutes went on, they grew a little brighter, closing the gap until they settled into a comfortable following distance far enough back not to be a problem, close enough to be company. Aaron felt a small, unexpected jolt of relief. It was easier not to feel alone out here when there was another driver back there. Somebody else picking their way along the same slick path. He checked his speed, a few miles under the limit, safe for the conditions. Whoever was behind seemed content with that. The lights neither gained nor fell back. He flicked his right blinker once, a casual wave. The headlights behind him blinked in answer one quick dip and rise. Aaron smiled faintly and returned his eyes to the road. The forest pressed close on both sides, dark tree trunks crowding up to the plow-piled banks. The snow filled any empty spaces quickly, smoothing rocks and ditches into soft, shapeless hummocks. Every few miles, a reflector post leaned at an odd angle where something large had hit it in some past storm. He took each curve cautiously, easing off the throttle, feeling the trailer's weight settle behind him. The headlights behind mimicked his movements faithfully, dipping and sliding in the mirrors as he turned, always at the same distance. It took him a while to notice the first odd thing. He was approaching a gentle left curve, where a patch of ice tended to form. A small yellow sign ahead warned, "Slippery when wet." He'd been on this route enough years to know that when the temperature sat just below freezing like this, a trickle of water from the uphill side often glazed the asphalt there. He put his signal on early, out of habit, to warn any imaginary drivers behind that he'd be slowing a little. In his mirror, The pair of headlights blinked their indicator at the exact same moment. Not a second after. Not with the small lag of a person reacting. Exactly when his own light began to flash. He frowned. Could be coincidence. Maybe the other driver liked to tap their signal briefly before curves too. Some habits were common. The snow swirled. The curve came and went. Another few miles. Another long, straight stretch. He checked his mirrors again. The headlights were still there. Still at the same distance. Still steady. He passed a plow going northbound, its orange beacon cutting through the night, blades throwing bright sprays of snow. As it went by, the buffeted air nudged his trailer just enough to make him adjust the wheel. In the mirror, the following light seemed to jump sideways for a second too far, as if the vehicle behind had swung half a lane out and then snapped back. It was a strange, jittery motion, wrong for the conditions. Aaron's hands tightened on the wheel. "Southbound behind me," he said into the CB, pressing the mic. "You want to pass? Go ahead when we get a straight. I'll ease over." Static answered. The channel had been mostly empty, but usually he'd at least get a crackle of someone keying up, a laugh or a word. He waited a few beats. Nothing. He set the mic back in its cradle. The road climbed gradually now. The trees thinned in places, revealing slopes dropping away into darkness. Small green signs marked distance to a river crossing ahead. A box on his dispatch notes had been labeled, "Old Iron Bridge. Use caution in high winds." He remembered another driver mentioning that bridge over coffee once. Something about a bad wreck there in a winter storm years earlier. No details. Just the way the man's voice had gone quiet when he said it. The snow eased for a moment as the highway reached a low ridge. The flakes thinned, blown sideways by a crosswind. For a brief stretch, his view cleared. Aaron glanced at the mirror, hoping to finally get a proper look at his silent companion. He saw his own trailer, the empty road, the pale ribbon of cleared track, laid down by his tires. And, centered neatly between the white dashes of the lane, a second truck. It was the same make as his. Same tall rectangular trailer, same style of cab, same company colors. Even the pattern of reflective tape along the trailer sides looked familiar. In the glare and swirl of light, he thought just for a heartbeat that the unit number stenciled on its cab door matched his. Then the wind shifted. Snow rushed back into his lights, and the glimpse disappeared. He looked forward again, jaw tight. A low, familiar unease stirred in his chest. The feeling of seeing your own reflection from an angle you shouldn't be able to. Of hearing your name spoken from a hallway you hadn't walked down yet. He told himself it was the storm playing tricks. The mind saw patterns everywhere. Two white trucks in snow would look alike from most angles. That was all. Up ahead, an illuminated sign loomed out of the darkness. Chaino up. Aria 1 mile. Trucks use. As needed. Aaron checked his clock. He had time to pull off, walk around, check his straps and tires, maybe let whoever was behind pass if they wanted. He could use a few minutes out of the driver's seat anyway, just to stretch and clear his head. He snapped his right blinker on. In the mirror, the headlights behind flashed their signal in the same instant again, a perfect echo. His pulse picked up. He took the exit into the chain-up lane anyway, slowing carefully as the road tilted slightly upward into a wide plowed gravel pad surrounded by drifts. A wooden sign at the far end read "Exit back to HWY." Fresh snow lay here, only a thin dusting over earlier tracks. No other trucks occupied the space. He eased over to the right side, stopped, and set his brake. The engine dropped to a low idle. He watched his mirror. The following headlights turned into the lane at the same angle he had. The invisible truck behind tracked his path exactly. Tires humming over the same ridges. It rolled up behind him, growing larger in the glass. Closer, closer. He braced for air brakes, for the faint jolt of another rig stopping nearby. The headlights came right up to the back of his trailer, and then stopped. No sound came with that stop. No hiss of released pressure. No whine of a slowing engine. Just the gentle, constant growl of his own motor. Aaron swallowed and killed his lights, plunging the cab into shadow. Through the clearance windows in the back of his sleeper, a pale glow from the other truck's running lights should have leaked in. The darkness stayed even. He slid his gloves on and, against better judgment, climbed down. Cold bit his face immediately. The air had that heavy, muffled quality snow brought, turning every sound into something soft and far away. His boots crunched on the thin crust over the gravel. He walked around to the back of his trailer. The snow behind it lay smooth and unbroken. No tire tracks, no disturbed powder, no second pair of headlight beams throwing long twin cones of light. The night beyond his own rig was simply dark. Aaron's scalp prickled. He turned in a slow circle, scanning the lot. He was alone, but he knew, with the kind of knowledge that doesn't come from reason, that a few seconds ago there had been 2 white cones of light in his mirror, filling that space. A gust of wind tugged at his jacket. Snow skittered across the gravel in small, restless eddies. He climbed back into the cab and shut the door with more force than he meant to. The storm outside swallowed the sound. He sat for a moment, hands on the wheel, listening to his own breath. The road wasn't a place for dramatics. He'd seen people talk themselves into fear over less. If he started second-guessing every strange reflection and chance pattern in headlights, he'd never finish a shift again. He turned his lights back on, signaled, and rolled forward, out of the chain-up area and back toward the main line. As his truck's nose crossed the painted line leading onto the highway, his mirrors briefly captured the lot behind. For a heartbeat, a pair of headlights burned there again, perfectly aligned with the tracks he'd just left. Then they winked out right at the edge of visibility, as if some invisible fence had cut them off. The highway ahead dropped gently toward the river. Warning signs multiplied. Steep grade. Bridge ices before road. Crosswinds. Aaron dropped into a lower gear, let his speed bleed off, and set his jaw. The bridge appeared out of the snow as a low, steel-yorched shape. Street lamps along its length threw pale, yellow circles onto the lanes, reflecting off wet patches that might have been just water or not. As he started across, wind hit the side of his trailer hard enough to nudge it. He kept both hands steady on the wheel. In his mirror, out of habit, he glanced back. The ghost truck was there again, centered behind him, headlights unwavering. Only now, in the bridge lights, it was closer than it had ever been. Too close. The beams seemed to pour directly into his trailer doors, bleaching the metal. For a second, it felt like a physical pressure at his back, urging him to go faster, to hurry across. He ignored it and kept his speed low. Halfway over, his tires rolled over a patch that looked like any other. The truck's weight shifted just a fraction too suddenly. The feel through the steering wheel changed, front end going lighter than it should. Ice. Instinct and training took over. He didn't hit the brakes. He eased off the pedal, let the rig ride it out, tiny corrections only, waiting for the tires to find grip again on the far side. In that drawn-out, stretching thin moment, something flickered at the edge of his vision. In the reflection off the guardrail, for just the span of one breath, he saw his own truck sideways, jackknifed across both lanes, hazard lights blinking desperately. His cab at an angle, nose nearly touching the steel barrier. The trailer crooked, blocking the path. Behind it, lining up neatly, were other rigs. Some he recognized by make. Others looked like smears of color and light. All of them had their lights on full, but none of that brightness reached the cab at the center of the mess. Then the image snapped away. His wheels bit back into clearer pavement. The drift eased. The truck straightened with a small, shuddering jolt. He cleared the far end of the bridge and exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. In his mirror, the headlights behind him were gone. No gradual fade. No trace. Just darkness and the receding arch of the bridge. The snow thinned a little as he descended. Trees opened up to reveal the faint glow of a town in the distance. His knuckles hurt from how hard he'd been gripping the wheel. At the next open truck stop, he pulled in and parked, hands still buzzing with leftover adrenaline. Inside, over mediocre coffee, he told part of the story to a man in a reflective jacket who looked like he'd been running a plow shift for years. "Bridge'll do that to you," the man said, stirring sugar into his cup. "Lot of bad nights out there. Fella a few winters back went over that patch too fast, tired and not thinking. Shut the highway down for hours. Story goes, he wasn't the first." "I keep seeing another truck behind me," Aaron admitted quietly. "Look just like mine. Sometimes I think it's me, from if I'd messed up back there." The plow driver's expression didn't change much. "Some folks say that road shows you where you're headed if you don't wake up," he said. "Little warnings, echoes. Call it what you want. I just know that every winter I scrape pieces of guardrail off that bridge, and every winter I see some rigs break a lot harder once they're past it. He took a sip. If something made you slow down, I'd call that good enough. Later, back in his cab, curiosity won out. Aaron pulled up the footage from his rear rufusing dash cam on a small screen. He scrubbed to the chain-up area. His own taillights glowed red, bright in the falling snow. Behind them, the lot lay empty. Fresh snow showed his tracks plainly, and no others. But over the course of 3 or 4 seconds, a shape darkened the screen. Not clear, not solid. A truck-shaped shadow, just a shade deeper than the night around it, resolved slowly behind his trailer, matching every tiny movement, perfectly centered. No headlights, no running lights. Just that outline, like a reflection the camera almost refused to see. When he advanced the footage to the bridge, there was another moment, only 2 or 3 frames long, where his trailer seemed to split one image straight. The other turned across the lane, ghosting through it. He turned the screen off and sat in the quiet cab, listening to the distant sounds of the lot. Outside, the storm moved on. The highway would be clear again in the morning, lanes bare, bridge detriced. He knew he'd be back on that stretch again, on some future night, snow or no snow. The job would take him there. The road didn't care about what he'd seen. But from then on, whenever he glanced in his mirror during a storm and saw a set of lights settle in at the perfect distance, keeping pace without change, he paid attention. Sometimes what followed him was just another tired driver. And sometimes, on the worst nights, he thought he saw something a little too familiar in the shape of the truck back there enough that he eased off the throttle, held the wheel a little tighter, and treated the next bridge, the next curve, the next patch of black ice, like the last warning he was going to get.